Right? The biggest constitutional breach in America today, all the threats to the Second Amendment, to the First Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, a lot of that originates with the deep state. People use this term, the deep state. What is it? The 4+ million federal bureaucrats who are actually writing the regulations that act like laws that bind the behaviors of businesses and people across this country who were never elected to do it in the first place. See, if our founding fathers went and walked around the bureaucracies of Washington, D.C., they would find it unrecognizable. They would say, well, what's this? We set into motion a system where you have checks and balances between 3 branches of government. What's going on with all of these bureaucracies with 4 million plus people making most of the rules that bind people's lives that have zero accountability attached to them? What's going on there? That's unconstitutional. That's why it's unrecognizable. We don't need an Article 5 convention to change the Constitution to address that real threat to liberty. What we really need to do is just apply the Constitution we already have. How do you actually shut down the border of this country? Secure it. Once and for all, your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. The reason people are coming into this country isn't because you have a shortage of people who are chasing them down or trying to go after them. I've been to the southern border. It's our own government actors that are rolling out the red carpet, paving the way for what I will call a mass invasion of this country. So we talk about basic steps we can take, like ending birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals, like moving our own military to the southern border, ending all funding for Central America until they've blockaded their own borders, each country, like ending federal funding for sanctuary cities, like mass deportations of anybody who's in this country illegally. There's 1 million people, over 1 million, who have had a final order of removal. That means they've gone through the court system. There's no appeal left. It's a final order from the judicial system that still are in this country right now. Mass deporting those people who have committed a crime. Start with that. The things I said don't require new laws. I do think that unambiguously, Donald Trump is going to be the best person in the race, certainly, by far, to lead this country forward. And I think he's going to be not a good president, but I think he has the potential to be even greater than the one that he was in the first. And I think he had a great first term. I said it on the debate stage. I think he's the best president we've had in the 21st century. People really turned their heads at that one. So wait a minute, let's just go down the list. George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, and Joe Biden. It's not even close. Who was the best president of the 21st century? It was Donald Trump. And that was in his first term. And I think in that second term, I truly believe he has an opportunity to go further because he has, like any human being would, learned a lot from that first term. He was hamstrung in the first 2 years of that presidency by a Russiagate investigation that was effectively a made-up nonsense out of a Hillary Clinton-provided Steele dossier that impaired his ability to govern for those first 2 years. So I think those lessons learned create the potential for a second term that will be more successful than the first. I think there's a good case for shutting down the FBI. Does that mean we don't need federal law enforcement? No. Of course we need federal law enforcement. But let's reorganize it in a way that you could take 80,000 some odd employees, agents on the front lines, because most of the people who work at the FBI are back office bureaucrats. Fire them, send them home. But talking about the investigative agents on the front lines, move them to the U.S. Marshals, which is just purely focused on execution, which has been far more effective on execution on areas like child sex trafficking. Move them to other departments for complex financial frauds. There's a part of the U.S. Treasury that looks at this stuff. It's called the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, that at least the people there have expertise to smoke out the future SBFs of the world. And so for the small minority of people who are good people on the front lines just executing the job of enforcing the laws rather than making them up, move them to parts that haven't been corrupted yet. And they can still enforce the federal laws that need to exist, but most of the structure you can shut down. I was at the UFC 300 fight cage side, and Mark Zuckerberg was there too, so we had a chat in between some of the fights. He's really into MMA, and so he said, we've become so neutered as a country, right? Why shouldn't we just embrace that we have these human instincts? I've grown to like MMA quite a bit, so I was like, yeah, I agree with you. I said, well, what about that with respect to speech? How do you feel about that? And then he kind of paused for a second. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I think you'd actually make the same argument for just saying that you get to say what you want in this country. We've become too neutered by trying to have central moderators of who decides what you can and can't say. And, his response was, well, look, I'm actually a lot more pro-free speech than people might know. And I've actually known a lot of his own tendencies. I believe that's actually probably true. It's about bending the knee and buckling to pressure. And so what I told him, and he said he would think about it, is if you say you're pro-free speech and you actually mean it, to just say, hey, I screwed up. Locking Donald Trump out of an account, a major president of the United States, and I was making the decision under pressure, and I screwed up. If you said that, I think that would have a therapeutic effect on the country. That's a form of accountability. There's a part of us that wants vengeance, but there's also part of us that is hungry to forgive.